What do you think are some important skill sets that you think help make an impact in pro sport? That if you were starting again, that you'd spend some energy on?
Just start where you are and whatever is around you and the demands of what are around you, just worry about that. If you're working, in a particular sport, just do your best trying to understand that sport. And if you know nothing about an injury that happens in another one, it doesn't matter. You'll get there if you end up working in that space. So focusing in on, what one or two things that are super relevant to you at that point in time. There's a lot around, reflecting, getting feedback that I encourage a lot of coaches and just get really used to. Just it doesn't matter if the feedback's, you go, you know what, it's not really relevant to me. Appreciate their thoughts, not relevant. That's fine. You don't have to take every single bit of feedback that gets given to you on board, but that way you actually get to see how other coaches think and what they pick up on.
Yeah, what are some important reflection pieces that you've done that you found effective?
So when I was at QAS, I had Tim Mosey sit me down when I was just struggling to get this. I wanted to do 10 things in a preseason and I just couldn't decide what I wanted to do. And he sat down and said, well, what's critical, what's important? And so that then from what do I need to research in my sport to do this really well at the moment has really formed a base for me to go, okay, I know in rugby, these components are critical. In men's sports, in speed, these components are critical. And then that just means that I can just dial just that in for the time being. That's the sport I'm working with. That's what I'm learning about. So I think when you read it, it's fine. But then when you have conversations with people, that's where we really implement mentally and our brain changes and our whole way that we receive information actually changes. It's a really interesting piece of neuroscience around how does our brain change when we learn? How long does it change for before that information then gets lost again? And how often do you have to revisit that info to make sure it stays current? So the idea is that you need to hone your focus in on a piece of information for a period of time and then come back to it really consistently on like a 4 to 6 week basis. And if you can do that and just touch base with it after you've gone really deep on it, your brain actually changes enough that it remembers that and retains that. So for me with my speed, I've never not coached that. My whole way through my career, I've had a sport that requires speed and agility. And so it's like day in, day out, and day in, day out, and day in, day out. And so then that's why it's really something for me that's pretty easy to talk about and reflect on. So it's probably a long-winded version of saying,
That's a great one.
don't try to read 10 things, focus on one.
What are some areas that are just essential that really set you up for your athletes to be able to improve their speed, whether it be efficiency or capacity?
The bit that's stayed consistent for me has been teaching a technical model as a set of skills. And the better that the athletes, so the closer that they can get in drilling as a skill, more likely it is that then when you're giving them feedback and you're giving them these different exercises to try to change their technique or hone it in, the better they understand where their body sits in time and space in drilling, the more likely it is when you give them 1 or 2 cues, they're actually going to be able to action it. I think I've stayed really consistent with that idea that better movers are easier to coach and can therefore change and adapt to the feedback you're giving them to try to get faster off the mark or lower in the change or whatever it is in your piece of speed. If they're technically a bit more sound and they can think about how they're running, they're probably going to be more cognizant of how they move and less likely to hurt themselves running at high speeds on a regular basis.
How have you experimented with your own training? Is that more a passion, a hobby, sort of that's separate to your coaching, or when you are fascinated like 12 years ago with Franz Bosch, for example, were you experimenting with one of those drills on yourself? Talk us through that aspect of your coaching.
I think it's always a strength to train what you're trying to get your athletes to do. I by no means can, squat or bench what the boys can do, but I do it enough myself that I can give them really good feedback, and knowing how it feels, I think definitely helps that. I do a bit of triathlon as my sport. I like swimming, riding and running. So sometimes I say that I do the sport. Sometimes I might call myself a triathlete if I'm feeling really adventurous. But I guess the thing about that is that you know what it's like to put yourself in the hurt locker with some conditioning and what genuinely working very hard feels like. And I do think that then helps you to maybe empathize or sympathize either way with your athletes when they are doing some conditioning.